Yeah, so loose topic coming off of last week that we did the retrospective kind of look back at the PlayStation Vita because of its life cycle pretty much being over. We were doing also, like you announced last week, we were doing it moving forward for a couple of the systems. So this week we are doing an Xbox One retrospective look back, kind of fond memory discussion. So the Xbox One and me have a weird relationship. I had full plans to buy it at launch. Then they said it was going to be $500. And I immediately said, I'm not going to buy an Xbox One for $500 a week after I dropped $400 on a PlayStation 4 plus the camera, extra control, games, and the warranties and all that kind of stuff. So my experience to kind of look back at the Xbox One goes back to everyone's favorite meme was the announcement and the showcase of the Xbox One, which I'm sure you know as well as I do. It was Call of Duty and sports. Was the all-in-one machine. From the original announcement of the name, I thought it was terrible. I was like, Xbox One? I was like, we already have an Xbox One. This is the third Xbox. Why would you? Then they're like, the all-in-one machine. And I'm glad they dropped that tagline pretty quick. The shoehorning of the Kinect, which people didn't really like the Kinect the first time besides playing like Dance Central and a few other little games on it. And the Kinect wasn't that much more powerful. The always online thing, it was mainly just the terrible leadership. If you want a offline machine, it's called the Xbox 360. How do you talk to your customer base that way?
Yeah, Don Matrick was terrible.
I just don't understand that. No one said that you can't go out there and say, oh, you don't like my new machine because it's always online? Well, yeah, play your 10-year-old Xbox. What do you mean? Why would you say that to the people who, this is a circulation. You make good products, I give you money for them. Don't tell me to screw off, pretty much. So, it was a weird time. And, it did release shortly after the PS4. I did not get my Xbox One until months after. I want to say it was maybe February after they launched. It was February, March time. Because they had no real exclusives, any titles I wanted to play besides Dead Rising and Killer Instinct were the only titles I wanted to play. So I did get it a couple months after. And I initially do remember unboxing it and just lugging that big VCR looking box, just putting it down next to, at the time I still had my PS3 and my PS3 Slim, my PS4 nice and slim, my Xbox 360 which was nice and small was the latest model, and then I just had this weight, just putting it on my thing, and everything about it was terrible. The original updating was terrible. And the original, menu was really bad. It took forever to load games. The Kinect would constantly turn on in the middle of the night and scare the crap out of me. The lights would start flashing for no reason. And it was just such a bad experience. And I was like, this is not worth for me to play Killer Instinct and Dead Rising. Because, Halo 5 wasn't near production, near the end of production. And it wasn't, I still remember when you first came over and you were like, you asked me what that giant big black box was. And I was like, yeah, that's the Xbox One. And your face to this day, I will remember it. That you look so saddened to be like, that?
Oh, no.
That? And I was like, yeah. All the wires sticking out of it, the Kinect was always in the way. So, and I sound so negative, but the launch of the Xbox One was so terrible. They finally did turn it around at some point, obviously, when you got like Phil Spencer and all these other guys coming out, really trying to do repairs and controlling all the messages. We got started getting decent games. We had a lot of flops. So you had Recore, you had another Dead Rising game that came out of nowhere. Halo 5 was very lukewarm, but they started turning it around and putting the services there. Game Pass, the Xbox, the Xbox connection was always good with Xbox Live. Game Pass and Game Pass Ultimate, and they really started looking at it as a platform to play the best games, and they started working on that hardware where it counts. Because you got to remember, the rumors right up to the launch of these systems was the PlayStation 4 is stronger. The big game that was used was, I believe, was it called Rise? Was that weird Viking-looking game?
Yeah.
That game ran at, I believe it was 900p.
900p, yeah. At launch, the Xbox couldn't do 1080p.
Yeah, it couldn't do 1080p, and PlayStation could. And when you're people, I don't know what Sony could have. Couldn't have asked for a better launch. This system's $100 cheaper and it's more powerful. Xbox look like jokes. They look like their first party games were not up to snub. And besides certain things, Killer Instinct looked great and all that kind of stuff like that. It wasn't until way later that they started finally turning it around with better games, better looking games. The care really baked into the games. Where Gears, certain things like Gears are still suffering from just staleness. To be able to just play certain games right off the rip with your subscription service, playing the games, now with the Xbox One X being the more powerful system, games looking extra good. Fallen Order, I got to see that on your base PS4, and I now saw it on my Xbox One X, and it's night and day. And not that we're really big graphics, snubs and frame rates and stuff. I want my games to run good and look good, and just distinctively they look better. So it's weird to see a system go from being a joke, being just terrible. I would say it was really terrible at launch, to being one of the systems so powerful, so well respected now, and just having the features that we wish Sony would bring over, especially with backwards compatibility. For real, now it is the all-in-one box, because I can play my Xbox game, 360 games, and my Xbox One games on it. It just makes sense that way. First party and third party support all working really well together. So what's your kind of look back and remembrance of the Xbox One?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, I feel like Xbox went through this gen what other people have gone through, what I call the humble generation, which is basically you come off a big high, and then sometimes people have to sit back and humble you a little bit and remind you, like, hey, listen, don't get too cocky on your high horse. You can still fall, and you best believe you did. It happened to PlayStation during the PS3 generation. It happened to Nintendo during the Wii U generation, and I believe it just happened to Xbox this generation, where they were coming off the 360. They were like the industry leaders, and yes, they ultimately got outsold, but we all understand that generation. They dominated for a long time, and they came into this generation basically, instead of listening to gamers, telling the gamers what they want, which is like, hey, we know what you see over there with PlayStation, and you want all these different things. But here, how about some Call of Duty Sports TV? Call of Duty Sports TV. Don Matrick, he's telling people, hey, listen, if you want and not always online, yeah, go to the 360. Like, they're just not listening to consumers, and consumers quickly let them know that that's unacceptable. And eventually they were able to course correct, and thank goodness for Phil Spencer. Like, I mean, he deserves infinite credit for kind of, at the very least, changing the PR. I know he's not sitting there on the bottom level coding for the Xbox. I know that's not him doing it. Mm-hmm. But in terms of just like PR spin and marketing and stuff like that, he course corrected to a point where, yes, by the end of the generation, I think they have a really, really good console. Now, to give people a little bit of background, I didn't jump into the Xbox One until last year. So I got to experience the console pretty much at its best. Day one, I had an Xbox One S. I didn't have the One X, I had the One S, but it's a beautifully designed console. Beautiful, nice white finish on it. It's slim, its form factor is amazing, ventilation's clean. I got Game Pass Ultimate, so I got the online thing and all of the Game Pass library day one. And since then, I've been playing it, and I've had nothing but positive things to say about it. I love the console now. But yeah, man, they had a really rough start, and unfortunately, it was so rough that they could not recover, and not so much in a financial way, but just in the numbers of units sold. They just are so far behind PlayStation this generation that in many ways, this generation's kind of lost. But despite that, they didn't really give up. They're like, you know what, we're going to set up the framework for a good next gen, and then we're just going to just try our best to do right by our consumers. And I feel like in many ways they have. There is no better value proposition in terms of having a library of games available to you than Game Pass right now. And PlayStation Now has its benefits in terms of its, the fact that you don't have to download anything. You can download things, but yeah, you can natively stream. But again, streaming games is a limited experience to some people. But I mean, hey, Xbox figured it out. They figured out backwards compatibility, and luckily they had the benefit of the fact that they didn't have to figure out backwards compatibility with cell processed, developed games, which is its own problem that kind of Sony shot itself in the foot with. they had the benefit of not really having to deal with that. The infrastructure of the 360 and the original Xbox are not like fundamentally different than the Xbox One. So they were eventually able to figure out a way to emulate those games and use physical discs from last gen games as kind of an unlock key. And it's a very clever, smart way they went about it. And since then, I mean, I've utilized it so much. I've been playing Mass Effect. I play Star Wars Force Unleashed. I play KOTOR. These countless games that I've been able to go to a local game store, check it real quick if it's backwards compatible. Oh, yep, it's backwards compatible. Cool. Buy the game for what? $5, $10, 15 at most. Go back home, load it in, and I'm playing the same game that I played 10 years ago on a last gen console, on a current gen console, and then quickly switch to Yakuza 0 or Halo 4 or whatever I wanted to play at the time. So, I mean, it's a real incredible thing that they accomplished. And going into next gen, I'm really optimistic for them. And as long as they can figure out that first party game release issue, that I would say is the one issue that still, as of right now, still plagues them, because they haven't yet rectified it yet. Everything is pretty much projections. Like, okay, they have all these new teams, Ninja Theory, The Initiative, all this, blah, blah, blah. They can really do some cool stuff now going forward. Yes. But we haven't yet seen it, so it's not proven. So as of right now, the main issue and the main indictment Xbox has against it, and has had against it pretty much this entire generation, is where are the games? And hopefully, I'm praying that they rectify that for this next gen, because I would love to see a healthy Xbox and a healthy PlayStation go toe-to-toe with each other. Because I feel like we have yet to see that. Because when the original Xbox, the PS2 was dominating, they were brand new to the space. With the 360, they dominated, but the PS3 shot themselves in the foot. So Sony wasn't in the best place they could have been. This generation, Microsoft shot themselves in the foot. But this upcoming generation with the Series X, hopefully they can have a whole bunch of good first-party exclusives. Sony, they're going to come out with the heat. They're ready to go. And then Nintendo, and just having all three companies in a healthy spot, I think is gearing up to make what I believe this is the 9th generation of consoles, to be one of the best ones yet. And I'm hoping for that. And so I got a lot of love for Xbox this generation, the fact that they were able to course correct. And unfortunately, the narrative hasn't 100% shifted for them, and they still kind of are like a bit of a joke and a punching bag to some people, where it's like, what the Gears and Halo machine that has nothing else to play, yeah, or he's really gonna cut it, like that they still get joked on a lot, because I feel like for many ways, like, this is kind of a shot generation for them. But I hope going down, people will be able to kind of look back on it again, like a Dreamcast, like a Vita, and be like, you know what? They really course corrected, and they really were onto something there. And for different reasons than the Dreamcast and the Vita, where they have their cult followings, this one is to right a ship that was so disastrously launched, and without having to pull a PS3 and completely tank the price of what you were able to do and cut a whole bunch of features so you can launch a console for super cheap. Xbox didn't actually do that. They had cheaper offerings, sure, but for the most part, they were able to kind of course correct just by listening to the consumer. And I think that's something to be commended. And I think down maybe in a generation or two, we can look back and be like, hey man, they really botched that launch, but they really course corrected, and they really listened to fans, and that was a humbling moment for Xbox. And hopefully we can see a really, really healthy Xbox, and this could be the start of something incredibly great and put them on a trajectory to possibly maybe win another generation. So that's kind of my general thoughts on it. I think there's a lot of negatives about this generation, but you got to highlight the positives too, because not many other developers and publishing partners could have pulled off what Microsoft pulled off here, with that kind of fixing all the mistakes that fast. Because again, yes, it was a course correction years in the making, but it was within one gen, and not a lot of people can do that. Again, like some Sega, for example, when they started screwing up, they screwed up multiple generations in a row. But at least when Microsoft realized their mistake, they were able to fix it within the same generation. And so I think that's something to be commended, and it didn't spell disaster for Microsoft in the same way that like it did for Sega. Because for a lot of people, when they saw that Xbox One launched, it's like, oh, Xbox is done. There's no way they can recover from this. And lo and behold, with a lot of commitment, a lot of listening, and a lot of admitting that they messed up, which is not an easy thing for a corporation to do. When corporations' kind of main instinct is to double down. Like, it's super obvious that Sony did a stupid thing with that Gaikai acquisition with the streaming games thing. That's very obvious. But at this point, they put so much money onto it, and they would hate for the negative PR that, no, we have to triple down on it. But Microsoft was willing to be like, you know what, we botched this. The Kinect wasn't it. This all-in-one console wasn't it. This massive brick of a console VCR thing wasn't it. And let's take the steps to rectify that, to maybe make up for some of the ground we lost. And I feel like they did. And ultimately, yeah, they didn't release the numbers, so we know it's probably not the best looking optically in terms of what Sony's been selling versus what they're selling. But, I try to give them credit where credit is due, and I give Sony a lot of credit where credit is due. And it makes me really excited for this next gen. So I would say, all in all, this generation was a success for Microsoft, despite the lack of sales, despite the real botched, launch, because of the able to course correct in a very unique Xbox X kind of manner. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to realize, they were backed into a corner where it would have been easy for them to just fold up and just been like, all right, let's just start releasing Halo on, well, at the time, on PC and PlayStation. Obviously, we did see one of those things fruition this year. But they decided to, instead of just throwing in the towel and making easy money on titles, they knew they had to rectify themselves. And they really did just, in a sense, just recover beyond something they couldn't recover. Nintendo could not recover the Wii U. So, as we always talk about the redemption story that Sony did with the PlayStation 3, and we talk about the redeeming that Microsoft was able to use with the Xbox One. Nintendo couldn't do it. Nintendo could not do it. The Wii U is now still a colossal failure. I don't care what anyone says. Xbox One is at such a high positive place now. Like, I would say they're evenly matched hardware wise and feature wise. They might even have, they definitely do have a leg up on Sony. So that's why they only both can just skyrocket now with the new generation with PlayStation 5 and Series X, or they can nosedive. And looking at what we have right now, apple to apple, Xbox is looking really good, and Sony is looking kind of bad with the PlayStation 5. So to see them to really just listen, like you said, to everyone what they wanted, and not just fixing their mistakes, but future-proofing their mistakes. They didn't just figure out backwards compatibility. They, made it a solid option for not even that. Even your Xbox One, original Xbox titles. You can literally put an original Xbox game into your Xbox One and it will play.
Yep, did it yesterday.
Yeah,
and it works perfectly.
And it works.
And it looks better.
And they just future-proofed it. And that's another thing. They went in there and fixed these games. They could have just done some emulation. They could have just ignored it because they didn't have to go backwards compatibility because Sony didn't do it at all. They figured these things out because consumers wanted that. Consumers want an easy place. They do want an all-in-one machine. And though you couldn't live up to it then, you did, at the end of the day, go through it. I mean, I went through 3. I'm on my 3rd Xbox One. I had the original one, which was not cutting it, super slow, overheating all the time, collected dust because how big it was, and those weird slot vents that were on half the console were disgusting. And then I did have an Xbox One X I was able to get a sweet deal on. And then I did get rid of it to play on PC because of what they were talking about, moving all their games on PC. But when they started bringing up the backwards compatibility, the ease of the backwards compatibility, the be able to transfer between Xbox Ultimate Game Pass on PC, the fact that I can play Gears 5 on my Xbox One, my new Xbox One that I have, and then go on my PC and continue my save on Gears and most of the Halos, well, not all the Halos, but most of these games, that my save just transfers. I don't have to import my save. I don't have to do anything. I literally just sit down and hit play, and it brings everything over to my PC. Like, this, the connectivity, the ease of it is what really they were able to just solidify. And it sucks because they're the only ones to be able to do that. They're the only ones doing that right now. I can't, going on some of the stories, I can't play Mario 64, Sunshine, the Galaxies on my Switch. But on my Xbox, I can play all the Halos, all the Gears. Most of my 360 games, I can be playing Duke Nukem, Lollipop Chainsaw, Brutal Legends. Yeah. You can play all the Fables, all the Assassin's Creed games,
Dragon Age,
on one system. And these aren't, I know some, people have their issues with the Halo and Gear series really just kind of driving the ship. But I can play all my Devil May Cry games on my Xbox One. And on PS4, you gotta go get the HD collection and workarounds, and you can't play any of the I think you can play Mass Effect 3 through PlayStation Now. That's it. So if you want to, play those on Sony, you don't for some reason don't want to get an Xbox, you got to go buy a PS3 that's still working, which those are getting to a limited amount. I mean, we both have the fat piano black PlayStation 3, and they sound like jet engines when we're trying to record stuff from them. Yeah, it's terrible. But on Xbox, it just works. You have all the Mass Effects on there, and that's what people need, and that's what Xbox saw that's what they wanted and needed, and they came in where they needed to be.
Yeah, well, to cap this off and kind of end this subject and end the podcast, what I'll say is a healthy Sony, a healthy Microsoft, and a healthy Nintendo makes a good, healthy industry. And I think, unfortunately for them, but fortunately for us, these generations have to happen. And sometimes they just need to get their butt kicked to remind them about what really matters in a game console. And luckily, PlayStation and Nintendo, they got theirs. And now we have the PS4 going into the PS5. We have the Nintendo Switch. Boy, did they fix a lot of the problems they had in previous generations. And now Xbox just went through theirs. And luckily, they were able to fix it during that generation. But that gives me a lot of confidence that the Series X is really going to be something quite wonderful if historical precedence has taught us anything. So yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate for them that they had to get their butt kicked for so long and so many years, but these generations sometimes need to happen. And I got a lot of love for this generation because if anything, it's a teaching moment. It's an educating moment for them. It's an educating moment for what really matters. A lot of and sometimes still to this day, a lot of powers that be like to minimize the importance of a service like backwards compatibility, and Xbox learned this generation that not only is it important, but it's kind of vital to a healthy ecosystem, not erasing your past. And they learned that, and luckily we kind of forced their hand, and now going forward, that's going to be something they incorporate in their consoles because they remembered what happens when they didn't. And I feel like Sony's going to learn that too, and Nintendo's going to learn that in their own way. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a good look, and we'll take a look at the PS4 in its own subject when we get more PS5 information and we kind of get a full look of the PS4 life cycle, because I feel like for the most part, all the Xbox One exclusives, whatever that means, because I know the Series X will be playing kind of the same games that are available, but for the most part, all the games that are going to be considered this gen games for Microsoft are out. Halo Infinite's going to be, a next gen game. Gears 5 just launched, so Gears 6, God knows how long that's going to be. And Forza's, nothing announced yet. So for the most part, we have everything, and we have this gen, and then eventually we'll get the PS4 and see how that looks for a subject. So I hope you guys enjoyed that.